The ship was dying. Commander Kira Chen could feel it in the way the deck plates shook beneath her boots, in the way the emergency lights flickered red and orange like a wounded animal gasping for breath. The Valiant had taken 3 direct hits from the Zorvathi cruiser, and now she hung in the void between stars, bleeding oxygen and crew members into the cold dark. "Status report," Kira said, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. Lieutenant Rax, a Veloran with silver scales that caught the emergency lighting, looked up from his console with fear in his large oval eyes. "Hull breaches on decks 4 through 7, engines at 12%, weapons offline, life support failing in the aft sections." He paused, swallowing hard. "And Commander, the Zorvathi are preparing to board." Kira nodded slowly. She had expected this. The Zorvathi did not simply destroy their enemies. They captured them. They took prisoners and used them as examples. The galaxy knew what happened to those who fell into Zorvathi hands. Around her, the bridge crew waited. There were 12 of them left, a mix of humans and allied species who had served together for 3 years. Ensign Tamaz, barely 20 years old, sat at the navigation console with shaking hands. Dr. Vex, the ship's Morani physician, pressed a cloth to a wound on her forehead. Chief Engineer Park was somewhere below, trying to coax life back into the engines. And then there were the civilians. 47 of them huddled in the cargo bay. Refugees from the colony world of New Athens, which the Zorvathi had burned to ash just 3 days ago. Men, women, and children, families who had lost everything. They had trusted the Valiant to carry them to safety. Kira closed her eyes for just a moment. She could hear her father's voice in her head, the way he had spoken to her when she first entered the academy. "A Terran warrior does not fear death, Kira. Death is simple. Death is easy. What keeps us awake at night is the thought of failing those who put their faith in us." She had not understood those words then. She was young and eager and thought herself immortal. But 20 years of service had taught her the truth of them. She had buried friends. She had written letters to families. She had stood at attention while flags were folded and given to weeping mothers. None of that was as heavy as the weight she felt now. "How long until they board?" she asked. Rax checked his readings. 7 minutes, perhaps 8. They are approaching from the port side using breaching pods. 7 minutes. Not enough time to fix the engines. Not enough time to jump to safety. Not enough time to do anything except make a choice. Kira opened a ship-wide channel. "All hands, this is the commander. The Zorvathi are preparing to board. I need everyone who can carry a weapon to report to the port airlocks. This is not an order. This is a request. Anyone who wishes to stay behind and protect the civilians may do so." She paused, then added, "For those who choose to fight, know that I am proud to serve with you. Chen out." She closed the channel and turned to find every member of her bridge crew standing. Even young Tamaz, whose hands were still shaking, had pulled a sidearm from beneath his console. "Commander," Rax said, "we should discuss strategy." "No strategy," Kira replied. "Just one rule. We hold that airlock until every civilian is safe or we are dead. There is no retreat. There is no surrender." Dr. Vex stepped forward. "The Zorvathi are stronger than us, faster. Their armor can take multiple shots before." "I know," Kira said. "I know what we are facing. I am not asking any of you to win. I am asking you to buy time." "Time for what?" Tamaz asked. His voice cracked slightly. Kira looked at him, really looked at him. He was so young. He had joined the fleet because he wanted to see the stars. He had never expected to die in a metal coffin between galaxies. "Time for the civilians to find another way out," she said. "Chief Park is working on the escape pods. If we can hold the Zorvathi for 20 minutes, the pods can launch. There is a coalition outpost 3 days from here. The pods have enough fuel and supplies." "And us?" Rax asked quietly. Kira met his gaze. "We do what Terrans have always done. We stand between the darkness and those who cannot fight it themselves." The ship shuddered again as the Zorvathi pods made contact. Somewhere in the lower decks, metal screamed as alien cutting tools began their work. They moved through the damaged corridors in silence. Emergency lighting cast everything in shades of red. Smoke drifted from damaged conduits. Bodies lay where they had fallen, crew members who had not survived the initial attack. Kira forced herself to look at each one, to remember their names, to promise silently that their deaths would mean something. They reached the port airlock just as the first breach occurred. The Zorvathi came through like nightmares given form. They were tall, nearly 8 feet, with dark exoskeletons and multiple limbs ending in claws or weapons. Their eyes glowed a sickly green, and when they spoke, their voices were like grinding metal. "Surrender," the lead Zorvathi commanded. "Surrender and we will make your deaths quick." Kira raised her rifle. "I am Commander Kira Chen of the Terran Coalition ship Valiant. You are not welcome on my vessel." The Zorvathi made a sound that might have been laughter. "Your vessel is broken, Commander. Your crew is dying. You cannot win." "Perhaps not," Kira said, "but I can make you pay for every inch you take." She fired. The battle that followed was chaos. Kira had fought the Zorvathi before in skirmishes and border conflicts. She knew their tactics. She knew their weaknesses, but she had never faced them like this, outnumbered, outgunned, fighting not for victory but for time. Rax fell first. A Zorvathi blade caught him across the chest and he crumpled without a sound. Kira killed his killer with 3 shots to the head, but there was no time to mourn. More were coming, always more. Tamaz fought with a ferocity that surprised everyone, including himself. He screamed as he fired, tears streaming down his face, and he did not stop screaming until a Zorvathi claw pierced his shoulder and threw him against the wall. "Fall back," Kira shouted. "Secondary position." They retreated down the corridor, leaving their dead behind. Kira counted 6 of her people down, 6 more who had trusted her to lead them, 6 more weights on her soul. But the Zorvathi were bleeding too. She had seen at least a dozen of their bodies in the airlock. They had expected an easy victory. They had not expected Terrans. "Commander," Dr. Vex said, pressing against the wall beside her. The Morani's blue blood stained her uniform. "I am hit. My left arm is useless." "Can you still shoot?" "With one hand, yes." "Then keep shooting." They held the secondary position for 4 minutes. 4 minutes of constant fire, of screaming and dying, of watching friends fall and forcing themselves to keep fighting. When the position became untenable, they fell back again. Kira's rifle ran dry. She pulled her sidearm. When that was empty, she drew her combat knife. A Zorvathi warrior cornered her in a side passage. It was massive, easily twice her weight, and it looked at her with those glowing eyes full of contempt. "You fight well," it said, "for a soft creature." "We fight for something you will never understand," Kira replied. "And what is that?" "Each other." She threw herself at the creature, knowing she could not win. Her knife found the gap between its armor plates, but its claws found her too. Pain exploded through her side as she was thrown to the deck. She lay there, bleeding, watching the Zorvathi raise its weapon for the killing blow. And then the ship lurched. Not the gentle lurch of normal movement. This was violent, sudden. The Zorvathi stumbled and Kira heard a new sound, the roar of engines coming back online. "Commander," Chief Park's voice crackled through her comm. "Engines are up. I've got 20% power, and the escape pods launched 2 minutes ago." Kira laughed. It hurt, but she laughed anyway. The civilians were safe. The refugees from New Athens were on their way to the Coalition outpost. Whatever happened now, she had not failed them. The Zorvathi recovered and raised its weapon again. "It does not matter," it snarled. "You will still die." "Maybe," Kira said, "but not today." A shot rang out, and the Zorvathi collapsed. Behind it stood Tamaz, his wounded shoulder wrapped in bloody cloth, his one good arm holding a rifle he had taken from a fallen enemy. "Sorry I'm late, Commander," he said. Kira tried to stand and nearly fell. Tamaz caught her with his good arm and helped her upright. "How many of us are left?" she asked. "7, including you and me and Dr. Vex." 7 out of 12, but 47 civilians were safe. "Then let's finish this," Kira said. The remaining crew of the Valiant fought their way back to the bridge. It took another 10 minutes of brutal combat, but the Zorvathi were finally beginning to retreat. Their losses had been too heavy. They had expected a broken ship full of easy prey. They had found Terrans. When Kira finally reached her command chair, she found Chief Park waiting for her. The engineer was covered in soot and blood, but she was grinning. "I've got enough power for one jump," Park said. "Short range, maybe 20 light years." "That's enough," Kira said. "That's enough to get us home." She sat down in her chair and looked at what remained of her crew. 7 survivors out of over 100, but they had saved 47 lives. They had stood against the darkness and refused to fall. "All hands," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Prepare for jump." The Valiant leaped into hyperspace, leaving the Zorvathi behind. In the cargo bay where the refugees had sheltered, a child's drawing was still pinned to the wall. It showed a ship crude and simple surrounded by stars. Beneath it, in a child's careful handwriting, were the words, "Thank you for keeping us safe." Kira did not see the drawing until later. When she did, she wept. Not from grief, from relief. She had not failed them. 3 days later, the Valiant limped into Coalition space. A fleet of rescue ships surrounded her, amazed that she was still flying at all. Medical teams rushed aboard. Engineers began assessing the damage. Admiral Marcus Webb met Kira at the airlock. He was an old friend, a man who had served with her father decades ago. His face was lined with concern. "The refugees reached the outpost," he said. "All 47 of them. They told us what you did." Kira shook her head. "We did what any Terran crew would have done." "No," the Admiral replied. "You did what heroes do. You held the line when all hope was lost. You bought time with blood, and you saved lives." He paused, then added, "Your crew is going to receive the Coalition Medal of Valor, every one of them, living and dead." Kira thought of Rax, who had served with her for 3 years, of the others who had fallen in the corridors of the Valiant, of their families, who would receive the medals instead of their loved ones. "They deserve it," she said quietly, "every one of them." She walked past the Admiral into the station beyond. Medical staff tried to guide her to the infirmary, but she waved them off. There was something she needed to do first. She found the refugees in a temporary shelter on the station's lower levels. They were tired, frightened, and grieving for everything they had lost on New Athens. But when they saw her, something changed in their eyes. A little girl broke from the crowd and ran to her. She could not have been more than 6 years old. She threw her arms around Kira's legs and held on tight. "Thank you," the girl whispered. "Thank you for saving us." Kira knelt down, wincing at the pain in her wounded side, and hugged the child back. "You are welcome," she said. "You are so welcome." Around them, the other refugees began to gather. They did not speak. They did not need to. Their gratitude was written in their faces, in their tears, in the way they reached out to touch Kira's hands and arms as if to make sure she was real. Kira stayed with them for an hour. She learned their names. She heard their stories. She promised that the Coalition would help them rebuild their lives. When she finally left, she felt lighter than she had in days. The weight was still there, the weight of the dead, the weight of command, but it was bearable now. She had not failed them. And that was all that mattered. The news of the Valiant stand spread quickly through Coalition space. Within a week, every sentient being in the galaxy had heard the story. How a broken ship with a wounded crew had held off a Zorvathi boarding party. How 7 Terrans had survived against overwhelming odds. how 47 civilians had been saved because a commander refused to surrender. Other species struggled to understand it. The Veloran, who valued logic above all else, could not compute the mathematics. The crew of the Valiant should have surrendered. The odds were too great, the cost too high. Why did they fight? A Veloran diplomat asked at a coalition council meeting. They could not win. They knew they could not win. Why did they choose death over survival? Admiral Webb stood to answer. He was tired. He had spent the last week organizing rescue operations and fielding questions from a dozen different species, but his voice was strong. They did not choose death, he said. They chose life, not their own lives, but the lives of those who could not fight. That is what you do not understand about Terrans. We are not afraid to die. We have died on 1,000 worlds in 1,000 battles for 1,000 causes. Death is not our enemy. He paused, looking around the council chamber. Our enemy is failure. Our enemy is the thought of looking into the eyes of someone who trusted us and knowing that we let them down. That is what keeps us awake at night. That is what drives us to fight when all hope is lost. Not courage, not honor, fear. The fear of failing those who put their faith in us. The council was silent. Finally, a Morani representative spoke. And if you fail, what then? Webb smiled sadly. Then we die trying, and the next Terran picks up where we left off. Commander Kira Chen spent 2 weeks in the station's medical center, recovering from her wounds. The doctors told her she was lucky to be alive. The Zorvathi claws had come within inches of her vital organs. She did not feel lucky. She felt tired, bone-deep tired, the kind that sleep could not fix. But she also felt something else. Pride, not in herself but in her crew, in the men and women who had stood beside her in those desperate corridors, in the ones who had fallen and the ones who had survived. Tamaz visited her every day. His shoulder was healing well, and he had been promoted to lieutenant for his actions during the battle. He seemed uncomfortable with the attention. "I just did what you told me," he said one afternoon. "I held the line." "No," Kira replied. "You went beyond what I asked. You saved my life. You would have done the same for me." She nodded. "Yes, I would have." They sat in silence for a while, watching ships pass by the observation window. "Commander," Tamaz said eventually, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Were you afraid?" Kira considered the question. She thought about the moment when the Zorvathi had cornered her, when she had been certain she was going to die. Had she been afraid? "Yes," she admitted, "I was afraid." "Of dying?" "No, I was afraid of failing you, failing the crew, failing those refugees." She shook her head. "Death did not scare me, Tamaz, but the thought of those children being taken by the Zorvathi, that terrified me." Tamaz nodded slowly. "I think I understand now, what it means to be Terran, I mean." "What do you think it means?" He looked out at the stars. "It means that other people's lives matter more than our own, not because we do not value ourselves, but because we value others even more." Kira smiled. "That is a good way to put it." "Do you think the Zorvathi understand that?" "No," she said. "I do not think they ever will." When Kira was finally released from the medical center, she found a surprise waiting for her. The surviving crew of the Valiant had gathered in the station's main hangar. Chief Park, Dr. Vex, Tamaz, and the others. They stood at attention as she approached. Behind them, partially obscured by scaffolding and repair drones, was the Valiant herself. She looked terrible, scarred, battered, barely held together, but she was there. "The engineers say she will fly again," Park said, stepping forward. "It will take a few months, but they can rebuild her." Kira walked to the ship and placed her hand on the damaged hull. She could feel the metal beneath her palm, cold and rough with battle scars. "She did well," Kira said softly. "We all did." Commander, Rax's second-in-command, a young Veloran named Trix, approached hesitantly. We have been discussing something, all of us who survived. What is it? Trix glanced at the others, then back at Kira. We want to stay together. When the Valiant is rebuilt, we want to serve under you again. Kira was surprised. After everything they had been through, she had expected them to request transfers, to find safer assignments, to try to forget the horrors of that day. You would do that? She asked. Commander, Dr. Vex said, you asked us to trust you. You asked us to fight for something greater than ourselves, and we did. We watched our friends die. We nearly died ourselves. But we also saw what that sacrifice meant. 47 people are alive because of us. She stepped closer. I am a doctor. I have spent my life saving individual patients one at a time. But that day we saved an entire community, families, children, a future. She paused. How could we walk away from that? Kira looked at each of them in turn. Park, covered in grease and exhaustion. Vex, still healing from her wounds. Tamaz, standing straighter than she had ever seen him. And the others, whose names and faces were etched into her memory forever. You honor me, she said, all of you. The honor is ours, Commander, Trix replied. They stood together in the hangar, surrounded by the sounds of repair work and the bustle of a busy station. But in that moment, there was peace. There was unity. There was the quiet understanding of warriors who had faced death together and emerged on the other side. The Valiant would fly again. And when she did, her crew would be ready. The Zorvathi did not take their defeat lightly. In the weeks that followed, intelligence reports indicated that the enemy was gathering a larger fleet. They were angry, humiliated. A single damaged Terran ship had cost them over 100 warriors, and the story was spreading through the galaxy like wildfire. Other species were beginning to question whether the Zorvathi were as invincible as they claimed. The Coalition Council met to discuss the situation. Representatives from a dozen species debated strategy, resources, and the growing threat. But one topic kept returning to the forefront: the Terrans. They are the key, the Morani representative argued. The Zorvathi fear them now. For the first time in a century, the Zorvathi know what it means to fear an enemy. Fear is temporary, a Veloran countered. The Zorvathi will adapt. They will develop new tactics. Perhaps, Admiral Webb replied, but so will we. He stood and activated a holographic display. It showed a map of Coalition space, with Zorvathi territory marked in red. The Valiant stand proved something important. The Zorvathi are not invincible. They can be fought. They can be beaten, but only if we are willing to pay the price. What price? Someone asked. The same price we have always paid: blood, sacrifice, the willingness to stand between the darkness and those who cannot protect themselves. Webb paused. The Zorvathi fight for conquest, for power, for domination. We fight for each other. That is our strength. That is what will win this war. The council debated for hours longer. Strategies were proposed and rejected. Resources were allocated. Plans were made. But the heart of the matter remained simple. The Coalition would fight, and at the front lines leading the charge would be the Terrans. Commander Kira Chen stood on the bridge of the newly rebuilt Valiant. The ship was different now, sleeker, stronger, equipped with the latest weapons and shields, but she still felt like home. Around her, her crew worked at their stations. Familiar faces mixed with new ones, veterans and recruits, Terrans and allies. All systems green, Commander, Chief Park reported from engineering. She is ready. Navigation plotted, Tamaz added from his console. We can depart at your command. Kira looked out the main viewport. The stars stretched before her, infinite and cold. Somewhere out there the Zorvathi were waiting, plotting, preparing. Let them come, she thought. We will be ready. She activated the ship-wide comm. All hands, this is the commander. We have been given a new mission. The Coalition is launching an offensive against Zorvathi forward positions. We will be leading the charge. She paused, letting the weight of the words settle. I will not lie to you. This mission is dangerous. Some of us may not come back, but I want you to know something. Every one of you was chosen because you represent the best of what we are. Not because you are fearless. Fear is natural, fear is human. But because you understand something that the Zorvathi never will. She thought of the refugees from New Athens, of the child who had hugged her in the shelter, of the drawing pinned to the cargo bay wall. We do not fight because we are not afraid to die. We fight because we are afraid of failing those who trust us. Every civilian in coalition space, every child, every family, they are counting on us to keep them safe, and we will not let them down. She took a deep breath. Set course for the front lines. It is time to show the galaxy what Terran warriors are made of. The Valiant's engines roared to life. The stars stretched and blurred as the ship jumped into hyperspace. Somewhere in the cargo bay, a new drawing had been pinned to the wall, a child's picture of a ship surrounded by stars. Beneath it, in careful handwriting, "Go get them." Commander Kira Chen smiled. They would. The offensive lasted 3 months. The coalition, led by Terran forces, pushed deep into Zorvathi territory. Battle after battle was fought among the stars. Ships burned. Warriors fell. The cost was high. But the Zorvathi fell back. For the first time in living memory, they retreated, not out of strategy but out of fear. The stories had spread, tales of Terran warriors who would not surrender, who fought to the last breath, who considered death acceptable as long as they protected others. The Zorvathi had conquered 100 species. They had never encountered anything like this. When the final battle came, it was not in space but on the ground. A Zorvathi command center on a barren moon. Intelligence indicated that the enemy's war council was meeting there, planning their next move. The Valiant led the assault. Kira commanded from the front, as she always did. Her crew followed without hesitation. They had been through too much together to have doubt now. The battle was fierce. Zorvathi warriors fought with the desperation of a dying empire, but the Terrans fought with something stronger than desperation. They fought with purpose. When Kira finally stood in the enemy command center, surrounded by the bodies of fallen warriors, she found herself facing the Zorvathi supreme commander. He was ancient by their standards, his exoskeleton scarred by centuries of war. "You have won," he said, his voice was weary. "But you have not destroyed us. We will return, we will rebuild." Kira shook her head. "No, you will not." "Why?" "Because the galaxy has seen that you can be beaten, and they have seen what it takes to beat you." She stepped closer. "You fight for power, for conquest, but we fight for something you can never understand. We fight for each other, for the innocent, for the children who will never know war because we chose to face it in their place." The Supreme Commander stared at her for a long moment. "You are strange creatures," he said finally. "You do not fear death." "No," Kira agreed. "We fear failing those who trust us, and that fear makes us stronger than you will ever be." The war ended not with a treaty, but with a simple truth. The Zorvathi had been broken, not by weapons or tactics, but by the realization that they faced an enemy they could not understand. An enemy that would never give up. Years later, Kira Chen retired from active service. She had led the Valiant through a dozen more campaigns, trained a new generation of commanders, and become a symbol of everything the Terran coalition stood for. On her last day in uniform, she visited the memorial on Earth. A wall of names stretched for miles, every Terran who had died in the war. She walked slowly along its length, reading the familiar names, her crew members, her friends. Rax, Dr. Vex, so many others. She stopped at a particular section and traced the letters with her fingertips. "I did not fail you," she whispered. "I kept my promise." Behind her, footsteps approached. She turned to find an old woman, supported by a younger man. "Commander Chen," the woman asked. Kira nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "You probably do not remember me," the woman said. "I was one of the refugees from New Athens. My daughter was the one who drew the picture, the one with the ship and the stars." Kira's breath caught in her throat. "I remember." The woman smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "My daughter grew up because of you. She became a teacher. She had children of her own. She never forgot what you did for us." "Is she?" "She passed last year, peacefully, surrounded by her family." The woman reached out and took Kira's hand. "But before she went, she asked me to find you, to thank you, to tell you that her whole life, every moment of joy, every accomplishment, every child she taught, was only possible because you refused to let us die." Kira could not hold back the tears any longer. They fell freely down her weathered cheeks. "I was just doing my duty," she managed to say. "No," the woman replied. "You were doing something greater. You were being human." They stood together at the memorial for a long time, two old women connected by a moment of courage decades in the past. Around them, visitors came and went. Children played on the grass. Life continued as it always does. And somewhere in the stars, aboard ships bearing names like Valiant and Courage and Hope, a new generation of Terran warriors stood ready. They had heard the stories. They knew the legacy they had to uphold. They did not fear death. They feared failing those who trusted them. And they never would.